we'll move ahead now to our next session, which is focusing more on enabling factors, but some of it's related to what we're talking about. Our next presentation from Geoff Fisher from Beyond Essential Systems is going to talk about the data management work being done within PacMOSSI, and that's already been raised in the discussion. So it's a nice point for Geoff to take it away and tell us a bit about the work that we've been doing to try and support the countries in this way. Thanks, Geoff.
Thanks, Amanda, and interesting discussion there, and glad to hear that Tupaia got mentioned. It was a nice segue to this part. So, yeah, just I haven't met everyone there, obviously. A lot of names I don't recognise, but so I'm Geoff Fisher, work for Beyond Essential Systems, and we're basically a software provider and implementer across the Pacific for ministries of health. We have a number of softwares, a patient management system called Tamanu. We implement M-Supply, which is a sort of logistics management tool. Senite is a lab information system, which we also implement. And of course, Tupaia is the system that is used, provided to the PacMOSSI group for sort of data collection and data management. And it's all about being able to collect data offline through an app called Tupaia MediTrack. So you download that app onto your smartphone or tablet, you go out into the field, collect data through surveys that have been loaded into the system. That once your phone reestablishes a connection, that data syncs into a central server, and that comes out into dashboards that are pre-created. So new data just comes in and updates those dashboards immediately. So sort of Tupaia is sort of a system for collecting data easily, but also reporting without having to punch in data at multiple points in time. You just have to collect the data and you see the results instantly. So today I just thought I'd take you through a few things. So one was just new developments in Tupaia. So just some of the new features that we've been developing, not necessarily for PacMOSSI, but just in the broader, it's a system used in a lot of settings. So we've developed some new features to it. I'll take you through some of the work we've completed in the last 12 months for PacMOSSI, some interesting pieces of work, and then just go through what sort of case study we're calling it, sort of development in the asset management space. So using Tupaia to manage vector control assets. That's sort of a new area we're looking at. So next slide, please. Okay, so some new developments in the Tupaia system. So we've developed a new browser-based data collection tool. So we have the app-based offline data collection tool called MediTrack. We've now developed a tool called DataTrack. So that's browser-based. You use it on your laptop or desktop computer, and it has some additional features that the MediTrack app doesn't have. It has just different ways of sort of looking at data and that sort of thing. So that data track, and we're going to start to develop that into a mobile-based tool as well. So we're putting a lot of resources into data track. Then, and one of the features in data track that we've also developed is called tasking. And tasking is simply a way of allocating surveys to Tupaia users. So if you want a user, a staff member to go and complete a survey for a particular facility or a particular field station, you could assign that survey as a task to them. They would receive an email automatically saying they've got a task. The task would have a due date. So you could set it in 2 weeks' time, please complete this survey for this field station, this facility. And then, so they're notified. They can, there's a tasking dashboard where they can actually post comments and say, oh, actually that due date's not feasible. Please push it out to or any sort of at a sort of a log of comments is retained in as part of the task. So, and then to finally, tasks also have statuses. So to do status is the task isn't complete but hasn't passed its due date, and overdue, it's past its due date, that sort of thing. So there's a whole sort of task management component now to Paya. And I'm not sure whether it's going to be applicable at all for PacMOSSI work, but it is there for any project now in Paya has this ability to basically assign surveys as a task to other Paya users. Another development, and it's a bit older now, but it's more relevant for PacMOSSI, is the QR code generation and scanning of identifiers. So each thing in Paya, whether it's a facility or a field station or an asset or has an ID, and that's an important ID that identifies that particular thing. And it's now for every ID that's created, we also create a QR code. And at the end of a survey, an image with the QR code and the ID is available at the end of the survey. And that can be printed out onto a label and stuck to the trap or the asset or the facility. You can stick the QR code to the facility. And that just allows, when there's future work recorded for that trap or field station or facility, that QR code can simply be scanned in another survey, and that identifies that particular thing for the system, and then you record your information against that correctly identified thing. So it's working really well for some applications, and it's much easier than punching in a number that's sometimes hard to read. You just scan the QR code through your phone's camera. So that's quite an exciting development, I think. Okay, so next slide, please. So the work completed in the last sort of 12 months for PacMOSSI, the insecticide resistance module we've developed in Paya, and I'll go through that a little bit more in the next slide, but insecticide resistance module, we've revamped the vector surveillance module. So created some new sort of reporting as well as sort of a new workflow to allow sort of a more realistic, I guess, flow of collecting a trap and at the one point in time, recording information about that trap, and then at another point in time, recording results from the lab that relate to that particular trap. So we've sort of worked a bit with Amanda and the team, revamping that module. We've also developed a spraying module for Samoa. So leading up to the CHOGM conference last year, they were keen to be able to record their spraying activities. So we developed a module for them, and that module can be used for different countries. We can customize it for particular countries, but that sort of starting to record vector control activities, and it's really good. I think you can, just a one-off activity might not be that important to record it, but over time, if you record these things regular, same with vector surveillance, if you record it regularly, you start to build up some longitudinal data that you can see trends over time, and it becomes quite a valuable and informative piece of information. So improved reporting, so we're trying to make the data more accessible that you collect. So previously, all you would sort of see is some the sort of final results of what you collected. So how many mosquitoes of different types and that sort of thing. And you wouldn't actually see the sort of the raw data you collected. So the raw data may not be that important for a lot of people, but we felt it's important at least to be able to have access to that raw data. So we now have in the dashboards in Paya, any data that's collected just now sits in a table. It's not very pretty, but it's it's there for you to be able to access. And that's sort of in addition to the visuals that sort of show where, when, and what mosquitoes were identified. Our data sharing agreement, this is just a minor point. So yeah, we're trying to, we've detected potentially some resistance in using Tupaya from some countries, and it may be to do with not having sort of a formal data ownership agreement. And so we've drafted an agreement that we're slowly engaging with each Ministry of Health, and the agreements basically say you own the data, and you have the data. If at the end of the project you still retain the data, and it can be shared with other PacMOSSI partners, but nobody else without your sort of approval. So that's sort of the past work. So now, next slide, please. We'll move on to a little bit more on the past work. So the insecticide resistance module was, quite good in that we're able to, basically the way it was set up, we had two surveys. So a setup survey, so to record, where mosquitoes were caught, and information about the trapping methodology, the time of day, all that sort of thing. Then can't remember exactly the whole setup, but then you'd wait for 24 hours to see how many mosquitoes had died. And this is after, I'm not an expert on this, after exposure to the insecticide. And then, so in Tupaya, you're able to create a new survey to record the mortality counts by species and sex at that 24-hour point in time. So you'd be able to record that against the trap that you'd initially set up. So you'd be able to, record all that data. But then within the survey, it was able to actually do calculations of how many, I think there was like potentially six test tubes, etc. That calculations were made about how many were caught dead and live overall, and then further calculations were done on mortality rates and adjusted mortality rates within the dashboards, and to present sort of a final picture of the mortality rates by mosquito type and insecticide type, as you can see from that example image there. That's one of the reports that comes out of that's available on the Tupaya dashboards. So we conducted training on that in the workshop in Fiji late last year as part of that broader workshop on IR testing. Next slide, please. So as I sort of touched on, the current work is really focusing on, I guess, bolstering and supporting countries in using the existing modules. So the vector surveillance module, the newly sort of revamped module, vector control module, which we're sort of developing partly with Samoa. We've got those spraying forms, and also that insecticide resistance module of Tupaya. So countries don't have to use this software, but it's available. It's a great sort of data management tool, and it's fun to use, and it takes a lot of work out of that sort of data management that you might do in Excel or other forms. And vector asset management. So that's sort of a new area. So we at Beyond Essentials, we've developed asset management module for Tupaya for ministries of health more generally. So for Samoa and Tonga, they both using Tupaya to manage their assets. This is more broadly, so there's biomedical assets and IT assets. So they've been using that for a few years now, Tupaya for a few years. So we are bringing sort of that, offering that, I guess, to the PacMOSSI teams. So it requires some customization. So, and also sort of, it's not strictly about assets, but we're finding out in the vector control space, it's also about consumables. So that's sort of a different element. And so if you can just move to the last slide, I think the last few slides, I think I've got some more information. Okay. So describe the asset management system. So it allows you to Tapaya through forms, through survey forms, through your smartphone, allows you to register an asset or a consumable via your smartphone. You can label the asset. So we've identified these label printers that are used in Samoa and Tonga, that handheld Bluetooth connected printers that the labels are sort of pre-laminated and they're sturdy. So after you register the asset, that QR code will be available on image. You can print that out from the label printer, stick it to the asset. And anytime you want to record future work done on that asset, if there's, for example, a sprayer, if it needs maintenance, if it's written off, you can record that in other surveys in Tapaya by scanning that QR code and say, okay, this asset's now written off, or the condition is poor, or the locations change if you had multiple sites, that sort of thing. Yeah, for consumables like PPE or spray, volumes of the same sort of thing coming through, we've developed these. Basically, you'd need to record the counts of how many have come in and how many you've used, and we sort of have calculations that you can get the sort of stock on hand currently of that particular consumable. So all that data sort of flows into reporting dashboards to show things like the status and location of each asset, the quantity of consumables on hand, service history if you wanted to record that. Yeah, and that sort of leads to data on what's currently available, past usage patterns, all of that sort of thing. So it gets to be quite a rich data set and quite useful for both knowing what you currently have and what you've been using, potentially forecasting as well. Last slide, I think there's another slide. Yeah, just more information on what sort of the forms look like. So the left-hand side is the screenshot of the Meditrack form for vector asset registration. And so Fiji, I should say, is sort of the first country who's really keen on this. So we've set things up for them. So recording your asset details, sprayer, manufacturer, serial number, that sort of thing. QR code gets generated, and then that information appears on the dashboards, so you can access that information. Next slide, please. Yeah, consumables tracking. Similarly, quantity received, when it was received, the cost per item, consumables used, quantity 10, I used 10, masks or whatever. And flick to the next slide, please. Then, an example of sort of some of the dashboards. So a transaction list of surgical masks received, quantity on this date, insecticide spray received 10 on this date, then used. And then, you can get stock on hand figures. Once you start collecting the data, it's, all sorts of reporting can be done. Next slide, please. And that's it. Thank you very much.